Welcome to the Mycelium Forum of the Mycelium Signal Podcast, which features open-ended conversations with fellow occultists and artists. Tonight, here's my fifth conversation with Colorado-based Karl Haikara of the Sol Nox Podcast. Please note, this episode was originally recorded for the Sol Nox Podcast, hosted by Karl Haikara. See the link in the show notes.
Good to have you back, Konstantin.
Nice to meet you again. I think it has been around a year since we last spoke, if my memory serves me well.
I think we did one earlier this year as well.
Yeah, maybe it was in the spring or in the summer.
I think it was in the spring.
Yeah.
I think we did. I think we had an episode around Purgisnacht, right? Is that this year?
Yeah, that sounds familiar, I believe.
Yeah. It's hard to remember. Time goes by so strangely that it's hard to remember. But yeah, but it has been a little bit since the last one. So
I think Terence McKenna said that we are reaching into something called time wave zero or something like that, that it will get so weird that people will be constantly talking about how weird it is. And I think this Roscoe fellow, I don't remember his first name, had this term future shock or something like this, that the advances of technology are so fast that people cannot keep up, and now we have AI and the possibility of the World War III or something, and I believe people are not looking forward to the future as something, beneficial or something which is nice. That I believe most people have this some kind of apocalyptic take on the future, if you will.
yeah, I think so. Well, it's actually kind of crazy if you think about how fast technology has gone in just the last 5 years. If you think about 2020 to 2025, like in 2020, we were not talking about AI in the way that we are now. They're just broaching certain ideas with global ID, digital ID, biometrics, all this stuff. All this stuff was just kind of ideas, and now they're all like coming into reality. And it's, I think it is it's very fast for people. AI in particular, I think, is kind of, I think I mean, obviously they were developing it, but it was there in the background. But it's really, the past 2 years, really, it's really just like come to, change the game for so much stuff, so many things, and it's, I definitely feel like for a lot of people, the reaction is either to, put their heads under the pillows and just pretend like nothing's going on, or to feel very somewhat apocalyptic. There's very few people I meet who are actually like have a positive feelings about all this stuff,
Yeah, it's like I know it's the polar opposites that they have this to avoid it, and some people fear it, and some people like hype it up, and I think if you think about generative AI, which can be criticized with a good cause, of course, it has brought us this kind of like AI slop, which basically means that some kind of like AI spam. If you think about social media, it's infested by it now. And I think that is the kind of, the low point, the low effort point. But then again, if you think about these advances in war technology, like military technology, it also uses like AI, this kind of drones, whatever, these kind of things. They are completely different things. And I think it would be a good idea to just try to avoid the AI slop and the idiotic stuff altogether, and just think what is coming up next, because that's definitely not like trivial and trite like the AI slop. I think when they reach some kind of general artificial intelligence level, that will be a huge game changer. And subsequently, if they ever come to the level of the super artificial intelligence, like a godlike artificial intelligence, surpassing every human ingenuity and capabilities, that would be probably the technological singularity, which was predicted like some couple of decades ago.
Yeah. Well, I also think it's a different in scale of the AI slop, AI misuse when it comes to art or things like this. Those are things that I think we can deal with. But
Yeah,
in a lot of ways, and in some ways ignoring it is actually the best course of strategy, because the less attention you give that stuff, the less the world is based on attention. But when you have the military, I think the main thing to fear of AI is, and some of the technological advances, is more so on a higher level, governmental, the level of control, as we talked about, I think, on our last episode. So it's like that's where you have to worry, but
yeah.
and that, I think that's what causes people, I mean, it makes me have the most kind of uneasiness, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it really is, in a sense, apocalyptic if you think about surveillance and this kind of development all over the world, with the use of AI, for example, like using some kind of high-level AI for censorship and suppression of free speech and whatever. It's definitely something which is kind of apocalyptically emerge, and there is absolutely no way to kind of trying to get it back into the bottle, the genie, so to speak. So it will be interesting to see if we manage to live around, say, 30 to 40 years from now, what the hell we will see, in the future. It
Yeah.
will be completely, absolutely fucking madness.
Yeah. The that is one thing that I always think about with scientists, of course, there's that whole kind of Lovecraftian idea of, like, science can push too far and uncover things that it probably shouldn't have, like, think about like the atomic bomb, things like that.
Yeah,
I think about with some of this kinds of forms of robotics and AI, um, some of the stuff I've seen, it's like somebody watched Terminator and thought, that's the future that I think we all want for human society, is let's create Terminators and and Skynet. You know what I mean? Like that, and
yeah,
that's literally what they're creating. There's people out there who either have never, either I don't know. It's and they'll say they love those movies, and you're like, yeah, why? But those movies are trying to warn you. You
yeah,
know, James Cameron has said, like, in interviews, like, he was trying to warn people of this kind of ideas that that he's thinking of, like, be careful of this stuff. It's
yeah,
interesting, the kind of perversity of humanity, that it can never not it can never go, no, I think we're good, you know.
yeah,
Like, I think there was a point in time where I think technology's reached a point where it's like, um they talk about actually the slowing down. Like, even though there is technological growth, there's also a slowdown, and you can even see it in things like, say, video games. The video game graphics have not evolved that crazy amount, over the past, like, say, 10 years. They definitely have, but it's slowed down compared to, like, say, 90 to 2000. You know what I mean?
yeah,
And that's in a lot of things, like the processing speed, all this kinds of stuff, like, has kind of like plateaued. Um, so there is a kind of, I think, a kind of a good point where you can have technology, and and humans can deal with it. We could have like if you had a period of time where we had, like, a kind of a similar level of technology for, say, 10 years, I think people could catch up. But there's something about the kind of perversity of some aspects of technological development, people of other humans in technological development, that want to push things constantly forward in this kind of myth of progress.
yeah. I think this is pretty hard to like explain properly, but I have been thinking this, that if you think about our physics and our basic elements of our psyche and the neurology, they are basically still from the caveman era, so to speak. So basically, if you think that we have cell phones, like smartphones, of course, and we have AI and whatever the things, and we as humans get used to these kind of very weird and very complicated things in some kind of surface level. But I still believe that in some part of our very primitive psyche, if we could kind of experience life through that way, I think it's possible via some means. I think that they are absolutely terrified, our primitive selves, in this kind of world, which doesn't make any sense. And if you think about the AI deep fakes, and now they have this Sora tool, which is developed by the OpenAI, who have this famous ChatGPT AI model. So it's like a video AI generator, and the videos I have been seeing from the second version of the Sora are pretty damn good, and it won't be it won't be quite. I mean, it will be soon that we will see AI generated completely fake videos, which are completely um, impossible to kind of you know. Um, Understand that they are actually like fake videos. So we are past the point soon where any kind of like a digital material hold any like evidence value in the court, for example.
Yeah.
What will
It,
this
it
mean?
what'll be interesting, and actually will a good thing to get in, kind of bridge to some of the stuff we were planning on talking about, but was the idea that what you're talking about. I think that's part of why in modern media, like there's such a move towards analog, and a lot of people, even young kids, like not Gen Z as much, but the younger than them, but even of Gen Z, a lot of it, I mean, even on YouTube, you can go on there. Like, there's tons of even the kind of Gen Z and younger kids who make videos about how fascinated by the 70s and 80s, and or even when we the 90s, like when we the whole era, that whole era and before. And I think that's showing up within film and stuff as well. There's a lot more films coming out that are like, yeah, we shot on film, like we're trying, a movement away from digital. And I think that's very encouraging, and I do think that that's going to be important because it's going to be like when something's real and it's actually been, you know, film made on film, and it's like real people, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
And I think that that also ties into something we were planning on talking about, which was the movie Skinamarink and uh the kind of there's this kind of lo-fi liminal horror movement that's gone on. I don't know too huge amount about it, but even outside of the very smaller subsection of those people, I think those kind of aesthetics are showing up in
yeah.
all kinds of parts of culture and film. You know what I mean?
I have noticed that too. So-called like VHS, like video analog style. It's everywhere, and there's also this kind of liminal nostalgic aesthetic, and this kind of like 8-bit Nintendo style. It's everywhere. The retro graphics in video games. It's like it's completely understandable, and it's even hilarious in the sense that now that we have all this kind of processing power, and we can produce like incredible graphics, there's still many like playable and like a good games with use this like retro aesthetic, and it's like taps into some kind of vein which is like trying out. So people definitely have this like urge and yearning to the simple times when the interfaces were like a mechanic and not digital, if you catch my drift.
Exactly. I mean, that's why uh, vinyl, made its gigantic comeback. Cassette tapes made their comeback. Yeah, like for the music scenes. VHS has made a comeback. I mean, VHS is really popular,
Yeah.
and people are starting to make new VHSs. You know what I mean? It's I do think that that's an interesting part of just the reality of as the human mind is that we cannot handle. I don't think that the human mind can handle digital very well in a sense of um when it kind of progresses into real life, I guess you could say. Like let's say uh um what I mean is that when it comes down to like playing a game or something that's one thing, but when you're kind of like the digital is like and the artificial is like making its way into every aspect of your life, I think that creates I think that taps into that kind of dread and um the bad bad feelings, and it disconnects people from reality, like actually really living. And I think that that is sparking a desire in people to I guess in some ways tap into in some small way older time periods when people actually like lived analog lives, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I definitely know what you mean, and I think a good example of like battling against that is that instead of always using like some kind of digital communication and using like digital apps, for example, journaling and keeping some kind of like a work or private logs, I have been using like an analog, like real pen and paper style logbooks for at least 10 years now, I believe. And it becomes kind of like a sacred duty in itself to just write down something when you have. Uh, when you always have like cell phones and keyboards and whatnot, you can of course use like digital voice memos. And I feel like when I'm writing my own personal log, it kind of writes and like carves something more deeper than using any kind of like digital means of writing. And I believe this has been also studied, and it was said that the creator of this bullet journal methodology, he I think his name was sorry, I don't remember the guy's name, but he said in the book bullet journal that when you write something down analogically, it kind of activates different parts of your brain, and you remember better what you write down with pen and paper.
Yeah, there's the physical movement is, activates a lot of things within the brain. And I think the soul in some ways. I think that, I mean, I've always used pen and paper for writing, lyrics for things like writing things like maintaining journals or whatever. Like I've never really used computers for that. Computers like for typing. I'm also not a very good typer. That's part of it for me too. But for computers, like I guess I prefer. A few times I try to write stories. A lot of times I write in the computer because just 'cause it says like one less step of having to type everything in the computer. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
But but I know people who have great success writing, say, a short story and long, with by hand on paper and then typing it in. Or there's people to this day who use typewriters. I think that's
yeah.
very fascinating. Typewriters again have more of a physical. I mean, I miss typewriters actually. I really enjoyed typing on typewriters back when I was a kid and a teenager.
Yeah, I think it's the kind of contrasting, like writing down with pen and paper to digital keyboard writing is more like doing a tattoo than scribbling something in the with paper. It's like doodling something, and I just believe that if you ritualize something, like my friend here in Finland, a horror writer, he said that he has a deliberate ritual. He writes, he wears certain clothes and listens certain music and really like takes the time to write. And I don't remember if he uses like pen and paper, but he really ritualizes everything. So it's basically doing a sacrament.
Yeah,
So
I think that's important for any kind of um, uh, artistic endeavor. Actually, that's something that I guess I got a little bit less out of it in the past. Like I could just kind of get in that mind. Eventually, you can get in the mindset like easy. Like as soon as you sit down, like for me, like for years, and it's kind of come back now. As soon as I sit down with my guitar and I'm going to start writing, I try to like get into that mindset, try to have kind of like certain ritualistic type of feelings or whatever, because then you can I think it's about turning off the conscious for me what's always important is doing that kind of ritual to turn down the silence on turn down the analytic part of the brain, because when you're doing creative things you need to tap into the part of the brain that's just open to what flows through. You know what I mean? And I think that's part of what this kind of rituals entail for doing anything creative.
yeah, there's definitely like a verse and better methods of doing things. And I had something in mind related to this. Yeah, uh, have you ever read this novel called House of Leaves?
No, I've never read the whole thing.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
started reading a little bit of it, but I never read it.
Yeah, I believe it has been considered to being one of the most difficult and obnoxiously hard books out there because of its deliberately like labyrinthine writing style, and it really gets absolutely weird. And there's a funny backstory to this. My guest for the Mycelium Signal podcast last March, I think, when I was interviewing him, he's Pyry Ojala from Finland. He's like an underground artist, and he has many projects. And he just brought me this book to the recording, and I loaned the book from him, and I started reading it about a couple of months ago because I have been like I have had problems with reading books of late because I'm always so busy and I'm too much using all kinds of like digital mediums because of my projects. So I definitely thought that I should really, get back to the analog reading game, so to speak. And I took the book and I understood immediately that this will be like a monster of book to tap into. And that was kind of the challenge I needed. And I took the time in the evening and I retreated to the sofa and I started reading the book like in a like almost like in a candlelight setting, and I really got into that. And after some couple of hours, I was completely hooked. It was almost like a psychedelic experience reading the book because I really had to concentrate so much because of the subject matter is so hard, and I had had many years of reading books like so I really went into that, and then I understood that this kind of world which is infested by digital technology and distractions and what have you is it's like a virus. And I was completely like transported back to the 90s or something when there was no such technology. And when I walked my dog that night outside, I really felt like this was this was like a mystical experience of really getting into reading a book. It felt so fucking good. Then I understood that this is really something that I should do to have this kind of like a techno sabbath,
Right.
to retreat into the cottage and take a load of books and kill the clocks and the cell phones and any kind of markers of the modern postmodern world. I think it would be will do good for everybody. You know.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's always good to get back into to actually reading physical books. I mean, I mostly I only read physical books really. I don't really read stuff on the Kindle or whatever very much. So I have that just mostly for a couple of things because uh like my friend Mike and I do the our series where we cover Karl Wagner, and most of the Kane stuff is all on Kindle for very cheap, but that's pretty much the only thing I read on there. I picked up a few like short story things you can buy for like $1, like horror short
Yeah.
story collections, but I don't really like reading on my phone for the most part. I just have the stuff on there in case, you're, I don't know, stuck at the waiting room at the DMV or some shit, but I like to read physical books. There's something about the experience of just sitting and holding a book in your hands, like that it's just for me the best feeling.
Yeah. and
And
and it's kind of like an active hallucination. When you're reading a book, you're kind of like orchestrating the story at your own head. You are the director.
yeah. Yeah, I've been meaning to. I have House of Leaves. I've been meaning to read it. I never really got very far in it when I tried, but I do appreciate the kind of modernist writing style that it goes for. It's that very Borges or something like that, where it's like just labyrinthian.
Yeah,
And from what I understand, the novel is basically about a house with like kind of endless. Where is like reality is kind of weird, where it's like there's endless
yeah.
corridors, endless rooms, and different things going on in it, right?
Definitely, it's basically like a spatial horror in the sense that it really brings to my mind Oculus's new album, "The House of the Black Geminos," in the sense that the house is the main character basically in the game. Sorry, not in the book, and I believe not to spoil anything on the book because it's so like hard to get into and it spans into so many directions. But if you really think that the main premise of the book, this happens very early in the book, and I believe it's also in the in the back cover synopsis of the book. Basically, if you think that this alone, this paradox that you would buy a new house, and then you would be somehow inclined to take measurements of the house, say at some particular room, and the room's measurements would be X, Y, Z, and then you would measure it from the outside, and then you would understand that somehow, like insanely so, the room would be bigger, like inside, uh, like as contrasted on the outside. So that would be like a mathematical paradox. And I believe the whole book start from this revelation, which just gets weirder and weirder. That something is the house is not a house, but it's some kind of entity on itself. And this is endlessly fascinating to me. That
Yeah.
there would be like some kind of and I think this is directly getting into what we were supposed to get tonight, the extremes of the liminal. But yeah, just give your thoughts before I ramble like the next couple of hours myself.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really awesome concept. That's part of why I wanted to read the novel because I really like the idea of the space not being the space that you thought it was. So like you said, like it's one size from the inside and another size from the outside. I like the idea of like endless hallways, that just suddenly change dimensions. That happens in Dark Souls 1 in one part where you're running this hallway to kill this like enemy, and it's just like this endless hallway basically. And then as soon as you kill the enemy, like the boss, like all of a sudden the hallway ends like right in front of you. It's really like kind of trippy, like I love that kind of aspects of like things not being what you thought because I've had that happen. I've had experiences like this happen to me. And I have friends who had those kind of experiences where, um, for example, living in an old apartment building downtown, the like 1800s type of apartment building, and you old for Colorado, but you there's like you're going down the hallway to your apartment, and it just like for some oddball reason just feels like it doesn't end. It feels longer than it
Yeah,
usually does. Usually it takes you a minute to walk down, and for some reason it's starting to feel like you're taking you like forever, and it's such a strange experience because you don't know. Is it just my own perception of time is going through some type of weird um warping thing, or is Holly just longer all of a sudden? You don't really know. I mean, because time is perceptual in so many ways, right? But the those type of experiences are really fascinating to me, and I love the idea of like people finding like hidden rooms, and or like have you ever seen that movie Grave Encounters?
no,
The that movie is actually pretty awesome, and it's basically this it's basically starts off as almost kind of seeming like it's supposed to be like a parody of like Ghost Adventures, but then turns into a horror movie where this kind of ghost hunting team is suddenly trapped in this old mental asylum. Like they go up and the front door um opens into a hallway that leads back to the front door. That type of
yeah,
thing. Like, and they're trapped. There's nowhere to go. They can't get out now. Like, and I won't say what else happens, like why it's that way, but those types of ideas are fascinating me. Or Blair Witch Project, where all of a sudden they're lost. They're going in circles. They can't figure out. It's not like the forest was that big, but for some reason they're like they can't seem to find a way out. You know what I mean? Like hiking for days and days in a forest that should only take you 5 hours to walk through.
yeah. Yeah, I
Like
definitely know what you mean, and it somehow brings to my mind um, Naas's Naas Alcameth of Oculus's Aoratos project, which had this album Gods Without a Name. You of course know the album
yeah.
quite well, and it has this intro called Parallax Part One. I have already talked about this with Nas on the Mycelium Signal, of course, so I shouldn't reiterate that. But what are your own takes on that particular track? Do you know what the track is about?
No, not exactly. I remember you guys talking about it, but I don't quite remember. But I know the parallax
Yeah,
is kind of. I'm trying to remember. Parallax is kind of like reaching that kind of the edge, right? Of um, I can't remember what parallax itself means. Like it's one of
yeah,
those things that like. So yeah. What do you remember what it is?
yeah. I could check like lexicon definition of that in for the sake of the conversation, but wait a sec. I'll just
Yeah, I should probably just look that up
fetch it,
myself.
and yeah, you can.
Parallax is the apparent shift in an object's
Okay,
position due to a change in the observer's viewpoint. Yep. Phenomena
yeah,
observed in stereo vision, astronomy, design, all kinds of things. So yeah,
yeah,
that's kind of what I was thinking of. It's kind of the edge. It's like the kind of movement of things shifting.
kind of
Uh,
like a singularity
yeah,
in a way.
object position, apparent shift when there's no change. When you're standing still and something seems to change movement. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is like another like a liminal paradox or some kind of like a liminal, tremor type of thing. My old friend once said that he was in a parking lot and he was, reversing the car, and the car next to his car was doing the same or something, and it created this kind of like a glitch in reality, in the
Oh
sense
yeah.
that it felt like something is really it's broken, because he didn't anticipate that another
I,
car would do the same.
oh, I've had that experience.
Uh,
And and it operates both ways. Where like if you are about, I've also had moments where I hadn't started reversing, and the car next to me started reversing, and it made me feel this weird vertigo,
yeah,
like because I wasn't sure if I was moving or if they were moving. And I've seen that before, even with somebody say pulling forward from a parking spot, but it's worse when you're like in a parking spot and you're about to reverse and then suddenly the person reverses next to you. Like it really makes you feel like a weird reality break where you're not sure who's moving. That's happened to me a few
yes.
times. Yeah.
I believe this is due to people being in the autopilot mode most of the time, in the sense that we predict that the reality uh, we would ensue in one way or another, and if it doesn't, it creates this reality break, which is something I really want to talk to today. But about the parallax song or the track, it has this kind of that it sounds like somebody is playing this kind of like very very old like not vinyl recordings, but they are like a clay recordings. They're
Yep.
very old
The wax
style.
ones. Yeah, back
Wax
in the
ones, yes,
1800s. Yeah.
yes,
Yep.
that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
And
Yep.
it's a recording is like a kind of like a winding down, and the music itself, the old music like playing on the wax recording apparently is not like eerie on itself, but during the track, because it's winding down, and it sounds like something is really this warping. It really you know created this disturbing effect that you are like in the past and in the present at the same time, and something it's you are in some kind of like a portal. And then of course there is this parallax part two, which is kind of closing the outro, which is closing the record.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just thought back in when I listened to that recording that this is somehow like ingenious in a very like a dark way, in the sense that the listener is kind of like in a trip,
Yeah. Yeah.
maybe like yeah.
I think you're like going through like kind of well, and you have like tracks like the dread spirit of place and things that
Yeah.
which Naas and I've talked about, relating to this kind of the genus loci that has this terror. The Aoratos album was one of my favorites um that he's done. I mean, obviously I love the occultists, but I really liked Aoratos because it's very unique amongst his catalog in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it has this like almost like a folk horror aesthetic, and this the track, the dread spirit of the place. I believe I told my visions to Nas too, but I can reiterate that it basically went something like this: that it almost feels like you are having a communion with dread spirit of the place itself. And at some point of the track, there is this weird phase where it seems like the already ominous and volatile uh, dread spirit of the place kind of has this kind of like a fit of rage. It erupts into some kind of sudden fit of rage when
Yeah.
when the music gets more aggressive. And I don't know, maybe it resonates to myself because I have experienced this kind of particular like rural liminal, where it feels like something is shifting, the almost like the atmosphere is getting very frozen, like paradoxically so.
Yeah.
It feels like the best way to explain it is through a metaphor or something. This actually happened at my old office, which is pretty fucking weird. But I had just been at my cottage, and that was like around 5 years ago now. And I had just spent there like a couple of weeks, and I really had a difficult time over there because it was like the liminal pressure was just so, it was so volatile back there. The cottage was like, how would it was, it almost felt like it was haunted. And I was through Katabasis process like back in those days. And at some culmination point, um, it felt like, and I have probably told this story many times, maybe also in your podcast too. But basically, I couldn't get any sleep. I was getting the heebie-jeebies, so to speak, and like extremely like disturbed feeling that I can't get no sleep. And I finally, around 6 o'clock, I felt like I need to get the hell out of the cottage with my dogs because that was just impossible to be there, you know. And I then drove to the city, and it felt like a black tsunami was like following me behind. It was completely like it was extremely disturbing and nasty. The feeling that you are like being pursued by something in some kind of metaphysical way. And I then took my dogs to my city house, city apartment, and I went to the very sterile and very ordinary office space around, say, 7 a.m. And I tried to just get some work done, but I couldn't. It felt like whatever some kind of spiritual darkness was still on my heels. And it really felt like, you know, the ordinary office space felt like something else. And I really thought that whatever the darkness and whatever the pressure, it was like emanating from myself. So I couldn't just, avoid it. And later, I believe, like some months later, I went to the same office and I tried to do some um horror writing done. I was writing a horror novel at the time. And I really tried to get into the mood because that was the only space I could really, to write privately. And when I got to the right atmosphere, I had set the clock that I should leave the office around 9 p.m. or something. And I was just getting close to the 9 p.m., but I was already closing up shop, so to speak. And I had got into the mood. And when I was just leaving the place, when it was like, 8:59 p.m., I really felt like if I would stay at the office space, uh, there would be something else, like if you think about if you would have like this is hard to explain, but in Finland we have saunas in apartment buildings, and you have a quiet time where you can spend in the sauna before somebody else comes up. You're running out of time. So back then, I felt like if I would linger in the office, which has turned into some kind of ritual space, for a minute longer, then somebody else or something else would, come there, if you understand in this like a metaphoric way. So this is something I got out of this. This. Sorry about the rambling, but it's hard to explain. But if you understand that you have your time, you have the human time, and then there is time for something else, the other. And if you are like, if these times kind of, in a parallax way would align, that would be like a bad thing. There would be so much, some kind of like a disturbance or something. If you catch my drift.
Yeah, depending on if that's what you're searching for, if you want to experience that. But
Yeah.
yeah, I had a similar type of feeling one time. Uh, when like this was back when I was still pretty young, it's like 19 or 20 or something, and I was living in the mountains at the time, and I went on a long hike through this like kind of area. where I lived, there was all these trails that you could go on, like within, and there was one that was like real long and went off into an area that wasn't inhabited, like there wasn't houses around or anything. And it was a really cool hike. I loved doing that. It was a longer one. I usually listen to black metal or, you know, went on a hike and the one of the times I was out there and I did like kind of a ritual out in like kind of the most like kind of the part where at the kind of the heart of the trail where there really wasn't anybody at all. And then I was hiking back and I felt like I connected with something and as I was hiking back and a little bit later as I was going, I started feeling this kind of weird feeling of dread. And so I started like rushing, like I was in the middle of the forest. I felt like this weird sense of dread, like something is I don't know, like that kind of like feeling like you get when a predator is
Yeah,
nearby,
you're haunted.
Yeah. And I like hustled my way back to the car and drove. And I felt actually kind of felt better. But then a little bit later, that feeling started coming on. And once it got dark, that feeling came on real heavy. And I had this distinct feeling. I lived in this like room on the corner above the garage, basically. And had like one window over, like one little tiny window on one side over the kind of where the bed was, and then a kind of a big like sliding glass door onto like a patio on one side. And most nights I'd just go out or leave the door open and go out and smoke and cigarettes and hang out and talk to my friends, whatever.
Yeah,
That night I had this distinct feeling that there was something outside peering in at me, like
yeah,
from the wind, like hovering outside the window. I actually even like closed the door and covered the blinds. Like I felt very, very like this this very horrible feeling of something unhuman uh watching me, you know what I mean, from outside. And it never felt like it was coming in, but it was just out there, in the darkness, like hovering. It felt like it was like flying, just hovering. Like it was a really bizarre feeling. But it was one that uh and it was like this fear, and in the end I just had to kind of like I kind of conquered my fear and went just like I'm just gonna go to sleep. Had the lights on, like
yeah,
went to sleep, and then I woke up and it felt there was still like there wasn't like the overwhelming presence of dread, but there was this underlying, feeling. If you know what I mean.
yeah.
Still the next day, and but at the same time, I liked the experience at the same time. As crazy as that sounds, like I put it into my music, made some music inspired by the whole experience. Because it is like this kind of tapping into these type of forces we're talking about all the time. That kind of holy terror in a way. You know what I mean? Of something, some dread spirit of place.
Yeah, this is fascinating. The idea that a modern type of human would be kind of like haunted, not by other humans, but something else, the other. And of course, if you think about the fear reaction, that is the human reaction to something humans can't understand. But is the pursuer or the hunter really like an evil entity or something? I don't think so. I
No, I don't
just
think so.
believe that
Yeah.
the Western, the Judeo-Christian dualistic good and evil type of thinking that is kind of like limiting our scope. And I just believe that if you think that the liminal spaces, say some kind of like a movie theater at night, if you are in a movie theater with a lot of people, then that's like an entertainment. But if you are like a night guard in the movie theater at night and you are the only human there. I believe um, there is this paradox of some kind of space built for humans, devoid of humans. And then I believe these kind of spaces you could maybe sense some kind of like a daimonic, uh, like a presence or presences or something like this better because there is this paradox that it should be like filled with humans, but it's not. And I believe that the experience for modern humans to feel that they are hunted or they are not top of the food chain is a very good thing to experience in the sense because people get to fucking obnoxiously, arrogant in the city because we have this constant lightning and the consensus reality is enforced by many things, even in the architecture itself, that people feel like they are like kings or something, but that's really not the case. A normal human who is scientific, and the term I used is scientism. Just look it up if some listeners haven't heard that. It doesn't mean like a scientific; it's a different thing. But then again, this kind of people, if they would be put on like a real wild nature, I believe they would immediately feel the pressure of the liminal and the numinous, like a great forest at night.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
definitely. Yeah. I think yeah, I don't believe in kind of good and evil of entities per se. I think that there are malevolent entities that generally enjoy who are the predators, and they're they they like to feed off of you of whatever on an energetic level, really. These are because they're not material beings, right? So, but they feed off of fear. I think that's part of what causes things like night terror, like part of what causes
sleepers.
night terrors and sleep paralysis. Like scientists say, oh well, sleep paralysis is a part of the brain, but no, I don't believe that. I think that it's the well. Here's what I believe that yeah, the sleep paralysis itself is a biological function, but why is that biological function happening? Sometimes there might be a physiological reason, but a lot of times people also always have those experiences concurrently with hypnagogic moments where they
Yeah,
see a black presence or they feel a presence on their chest, that kind of stuff. Like, um, I don't think I feel like will just blindly ignoring millennia across every single culture of people having these experiences and just saying that oh it's just physiological, it's just people like having hallucinations, blah blah blah, like basically just writing off hallucinate, the whole thing. But from my experience of having those, I can tell you that it's not physiological necessarily because I haven't had those kind of things happen to me in a long time. It was only a certain period of time when I was working with certain types of entities, exploring certain spiritual dimensions that I had those experiences the most, and and this just goes ties into everything like for example that entity that I encountered in the woods that day, I don't necessarily think was malevolent. Even I don't, but I do think it was unhuman in a way that um brought upon that kind of dread, that holy dread that Richard Gavin talks about. Like that was what I was feeling. I was feeling hunted, but I was also feeling in a moment like in the forest. But later it was a feeling of like something truly unhuman is just like kind of is there, that you're encountering something truly uncanny, and um I my feelings about it was that I don't think it was out there to hurt me, but I think it was attracted by the ritual I did in the forest,
yeah,
and it was like coming to check me out in some way. But the unhumanity can be terrifying for us because there are presences and things out there that operate on a, animals, for example, operate in ways that we don't always understand. People have the idea that they understand animals, but I don't think they do. A lot of things do, but unhuman entity operates in ways that we can't even imagine. We often put our own human ideas onto them, projecting. You look at the Greek gods. Like I think there's a lot of like, you know, millennia of people making stories about them and projecting humanity on what are inhuman entities. And when you dig down in the stories, they operate in ways that have no human logic, really. Like uh, people say, "Oh, they're just like humans." I'm like, I don't think so. I think they're kind of clothed in human, but they're way like Odin or Zeus or something like that operates as very unhuman, even in the myths. And when you have like some wild spirit in the middle of the dark woods, it's really going to operate in a way that's totally inhuman. And I've encountered those types of entities multiple times in my life, and always with the same sense of dread, that comes upon you. But it's that type of thing that you can only encounter. You encounter similar types of entities walking through you know, the uh, the the city, obviously, in certain, particularly at night. But there's a totally different type of thing when you're out in the woods, in the middle of nowhere, and you come across those types of entities, or probably when you're up at your cabin, when you're anywhere that's like really uh, cut off in some way, and but I do think that those types of experiences, we talked about this last episode of like the urban experience, right? That was something we got into. And I think that these types of things can happen in your house and
Yes,
very much, you can have these types of weird liminal places in your house, that things come through and.
definitely. This uh, brought many points to my head. I try to uh, keep up with my own thoughts now, but I think we are getting really something somewhere really interesting territory here. Um, One thing which came to my mind, like you last said, that these kind of phenomenon are most strongest in some kind of like wild liminal settings, say in the forest and in the wildlands, so to speak. Of course they are, because in those spaces we, as some kind of like transceivers, our minds, our psyches are more attuned to this kind of experience, and of course it would be harder to have a like actual liminal experience in some kind of like you know apartment building which is furnished by IKEA or something. The Scandinavian bleak light aesthetic style. Of
Although
course,
I do think it's possible,
yeah.
definitely. It depends. Yeah. Just depends. Yeah.
It, I think it is. It's possible, and I'm trying to get to there that, for example, this apartment I'm um, recording this at this time, I have been living around 25 years now, and my wife has been living here maybe 15 to 20 years too. So I lived here around 5 years before she moved in, and you can just imagine that I was younger, and I was like I was hardcore into this kind of stuff even back then. And because I lived alone, I had the whole fucking place devoted to my art and whatever back in the day occult experiments. And I even had this one room within a room, like a room in the living room. In the sense, I called it the black room, and I used it for art and rituals. And it was just like divided with bookshelves and curtains and whatnot. And I had very nasty sleep paralysis nightmares almost every night, and I was exhilarated and as I was terrified at nights. So I was kind of living at the edge, and it really felt like this whole apartment was haunted to some sense. And it was funny that my wife mentioned, like even like around 5 or 10 years ago, still that how it doesn't matter how many lamps and lights we set up in the house, like how many lumens we can like muster up here. It still feels like a dark. And my wife always complained that the kind of like a metaphysical darkness which had apparently infested this apartment building when I was living alone was still like present. And I believe it has waned over the years, but it was really like something I understood even myself. And I believe that is like maybe it's a subjective experience, and maybe it's basically like something you are the conduit of, because this same experiment, sorry, the same experience and the same phenomenon also happened at the cottage, and it kind of fluctuates along with you yourself. And I believe you know what I mean.
Yeah, we are the
You're channeling it.
yeah, we
Conduits.
are. Yeah, we are the conduit. Yeah, we're the
Yeah.
that's what we are the kind of, our bodies are the kind of mechanism, that the
Yeah.
tool that allows these things, our experience of these things. But um and I believe that anything with the liminal, with the kind of uncanny other side of things, the more that you let it in, the more that it takes root in this reality, and that we can build doorways and gateways to, we can build abyssic doors, that allow these things to just emanate into our reality. I really believe in those types of ideas, because, and it's just like you're describing, like you were devoted to the dark for, that whole period of time, living within it at all times, so it came to inhabit, your whole living space. And do you feel like do you feel like as you got older, you like to have maybe a ritual space that is dedicated to them, but maybe have like a part of your living space that is kind of separate from that in a way, so you can have a break from it?
Um, I think so, in the sense that I believe what has happened is some kind of like a sublimation. I have kind of distilled that kind of like a raw power into something more like refined. It's more like at first it was some kind of like a very raw and primitive moon sign. It burns your throat, and it's probably even toxic in some sense. And now it's more like a fine cognac, or find like whiskey or something like it's like it it tastes better and it's more refined. And I believe that if I remember all the places I have been living, say uh, my original room when I was still living with my parents, like but it was like maybe 30 years ago or something. It eventually had the same atmosphere, and when I moved to my first apartment, it also had that at my second apartment. It's like something which has followed me in the sense. And in that sense, of course, it is subjective. I don't believe or think that the other people would understand these things or even experience them, because
uh,
it's my world. I am the conduit for that kind of stuff. And what happened at the cottage was quite interesting. That I may have told you this before, but I hope not. Basically, during my cataphasis phase, which has lasted around 5 years at the cottage, because I have been partly living there, uh, it happened like during the first year or so, and it was still in the very like how would you say, like a radioactive phase, in the sense that every night and every day, and especially every night, spending there and sleeping at the cottage was kind of like an ordeal which I just had to endure. I was communicating something to a colleague of mine at night, and I was in a good mood, and I was getting some art done and whatever, and suddenly I felt this weird, like a stomach cramp, it felt like I was getting sick, but very suddenly. It was weird. I got a high fever, and I felt like I'm getting like a stomach flu or something. And then I said to my colleague that I need to stop now because I'm not definitely feeling well. And I was at the old side of the cottage, and I just retreated to the bed instantly, and I felt the fever was like really like amping up, and I was only with my dogs there. And then I just couldn't even move. I was trembling, and I was almost hallucinating from the high fever. And I understood, of course, that I couldn't even drive, of course, because I was so messed up by the fever. And then at that point, I understood that because of the friction at the cottage, I understood that I have really royally fucked up now. I am basically like in the church ritual. I'm at the altar, and the demons are going to absolutely tear me up. I was like a human feast, whatever was just waiting for the right time. And then I just understood that I just really have to let go. I really have to succumb to whatever of the pressure and face it like a head on. And what happened wasn't like some kind of metaphysical dismemberment, but instead I suddenly felt this like bliss and this kind of very weird, strong inner peace, even though I was hallucinating from the fever itself. And I felt like I am almost like protected by the cottage or whatever the spiritual space, the kind of, how would you say, um my psyche was kind of like a cradled. And then I fell asleep, and at some point the dogs visited me to check up on me, and the fever went away, and I was completely dumbfounded that what I predicted would be like a total, um, total ordeal, and I would really get like totally messed up by the whatever. I was instead kind of, what's the word? I'm lost at words here, but it was kind of like an initiation or some kind of like a recognition that I made some kind of inner peace with the friction or whatever that was. And after that, the energy of the place or the psychosphere, whatever, turned much more benevolent and better, even though it retained this kind of like a weird edge, the liminal, edge, with some time later, amped up a bit, but never to the level of the first night. I, I mean, the night I just had to evacuate the premises, like in the Amityville horror movie. You know,
Yeah.
it was really weird.
Yeah. I definitely I mean, yeah, it makes sense. The experience that we have uh it's like a burning away of the fear or the of thing, it's a literal burning away of things,
Yeah.
and uh and I do think that part of the process of the kind of catabasis, which we've discussed in the past, is to, I think, in some ways embrace the dark, if that makes sense. Like,
Yes.
at this point, for me, um, like I haven't had night terrors in forever. I don't really have a lot of, but I've really like embraced all these types of things. I've embraced the unhumanity, and the unhuman
Yeah.
mindset within myself and and in the world, uh and integrated it into my reality. So I think it's like, as you integrate this kind of the dark and the shadow, the night side, you could say, it is a process. You have to go through it, and it is a part of burning off fear, confronting fear. That's part of the idea of the chode ritual, of Tibetan Buddha, not Buddha, really Buddhism, but Tibetan Bonpo, is to offer up these things to the demons, essentially let them tear you apart, and then you come,
Yes.
I think there is this kind of aspect to the process, and it's not to then emerge without fear or because I do think that the kind of holy terror and things that Richard talks about is very important. It's an important almost sacrament of the work but it's like, um but it's different. You have to really, you know it's more about, that comes down to finding the liminal moments to open the gateways, you know what I mean, which will, no matter how much you're integrated with it, inspire these types of holy, sublime terror moments, right? But there's something about the experience of integrating with all this darkness that, yeah, you just start to progress to the point where you're not really, yeah, I think you're some ways protecting yourself from the kind of more malevolent entities, um, and by aligning yourself with the greater dark, becoming one of them in some ways. I don't think those entities really feed on each other. They feed on humans and psychic energy and things, right? But the and that's something that we were talking about. I wanted to bring up about we were mentioning earlier with when I was saying that the spirit in the middle of nature felt very unhuman, but not necessarily malevolent. But there was a terror in its presence. Um, I do think that in human places, in the city, in the house, I think you're more likely to encounter the malevolent entities, the malevolent side of the uncanny, because it, those are the things that like to feed off of the fear and particularly people who are blind, just kind of sleepwalking through life. They're very easy prey. So
Yeah.
so the city and the house is a very good hunting ground for these types of entities, if you know what I mean.
I believe so. And I think this is a very interesting topic in the sense, and something I already like to discuss about is that we should really think about the taxonomy of this kind of supposed like daimonic entities, in the sense that if we suppose that there is some kind of like a daimonic world or daimonic reality which doesn't abide by the laws of human nature, of course. And if you think about the actual nature, there are parasites. They're like horrible parasites,
Yeah,
which are just organisms which, when they infest human body, it really looks like horror. But do you think like a tapeworm or something is like evil? No, it's not. Of course, it's like if you in the woods and you run into cougar or something, it would really like mold you and mess you up. And but is it evil? No, it's just trying to eat.
exactly.
It's
Yeah,
a life form. Like
yeah,
we are humans, quite a nasty life form to like other mammals, of course. Like if you think about the food production and whatnot, I mean the industrialized food production, of course, and not hunting, which is a different thing, of course, than the industrial food production. Um, uh, and it's interesting that if you think that if you kind of remove the Judeo-Christian dualistic good and evil dichotomy from this equation, so to speak, and if you just think that maybe if there are some kind of demonic parasitical entities, but they are not evil or bad per se, but they are kind of how would you say, they are negative to
Yeah,
you
that's why I
as
always
human.
say
Yes.
malevolent. They're kind of. I think there are entities that are malevolent in the sense that they like to cause destruction. That's why we have destruction deities or destruction demons and whatever. And say look at like Eastern, like say Japanese, Chinese, Eastern religions, particularly the more ancient ones like Shinto, Bonpo, old Chinese religion, the kind of more pagan, quote unquote. There's whole classes of non-human entities. They have a whole taxonomy of things, and there are
Yeah.
what their version of demons aren't really evil, but they are
Yeah.
things that take they like to cause destruction. Maybe they like to cause you know negativity. Like you said, just parasites. I definitely think there are parasitical entities that attach themselves to people, and then I don't know. People have these experiences where they feel like this weight of this darkness is just upon them, and they're like, uh, a lot of times it might come with like some moment. They might have some moment where it feels like something attached itself to them, and then they're like, everything starts going wrong. This kind of general negativity starts surrounding the person. All this stuff goes wrong. It's almost like the entity wants to spiral the person out into like, total like devastation. You know what I mean? So it can feed off of all this like negative emotions. I think these things
Yeah.
exist.
Have you actually read Colin Wilson's Mind Parasites book?
No, I
It's a
haven't.
quite
Yeah, I haven't read that. No.
it's it's quite a Lovecraftian novel. I believe Colin Wilson, the late British author, and he was explorer of these kind of things, also occult, and he wrote the book as in some kind of like contest or something to prove a point with some people back in the day, and it was deliberately like Lovecraftian plot, but it was really interesting, like how would you say, study on the human mind. That in the book there are these kind of like extraterrestrial mind parasites which kind of deliberately feed on human misery, and they can even like cause some of the main characters in the book to commit suicide,
Yeah.
and the other like scientists are trying to battle them, and it's quite a nasty book if you get into it. I believe you can find it on Amazon or something. But anyhow, this idea of the taxonomy of the demonic entities have been really intriguing me for a long time. And if you think that there are some families which are uh, the kind of like bad luck seems to run on some families, and it's almost like an intergenerational curse. And I believe this was also mentioned in the Bible, like the sins of the fathers, and
Yeah.
it really feels like some people really can't get a break. It's like it runs so deep, and we have this Finnish author called Harri Linnera, which is also a guest from the Mycelium Signal. He has written novels and books about the same subject, and he has this interesting concept. I believe it's a Gnostic concept called Heimarmane. It's hard to pronounce, but Heimarmene or something. And it's basically, he said, like in his book, the title of the book is in Finnish. It's called the same old train. So basically, it's like some kind of like a spiral, and some kind of almost like a karmic wheel of misfortune, which kind of like traps people to its spinning, and
Yeah.
it
So that would be
yeah,
very appropriate with even old Nordic ideas,
yeah,
of the generational, curse that occur that not kind of like the fate that can attract, like think about like um the story of Sigurd, the the dragon slayer, and the kind of when you read the saga of the Volsungs, there's this the Volsungs are almost like a kind of they're cursed to glory, but also to pain, like on a generational level.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No problem. It's harrowing that I have seen firsthand these kind of people, and it's the suffering is just like immeasurable. That some people like are in this kind of like a curse, and I don't very much believe in curse, but then again I seem to do. But it's just absolutely harrowing that and if you think there's this book by Dan Simmons, I haven't read, but I have it in my bookshelf. It's called Carrion Comfort, and it has this kind of like an intergenerational, like a breed or of psychic vampires. They're not like your average vampires, but they're like they look like humans, but they have been feeding off the human misery for like centuries or something, and the length of the book is the length of the Bible, so it's a very long book. I really need to read it at some point. But the Jungian shadow itself is very fascinating in the sense that most people apparently don't have any clue that what they're capable of and what kind of shadow they're dragging behind them. And maybe if they don't have any idea about that, they can just kind of pass it on to their children, and the curse just continues from generation to generation.
Yeah, and having the bigger shadow, I think, opens a bigger ability for if there is a kind of non-human entity, parasitical entity attract, I do think it can get in there and it can go from generation to generation. And one thing I was thinking about with what we're talking about, another good example of this in media is Twin Peaks. David Lynch,
Yeah.
Twin Peaks: To Return. He talks about you have Judy, the kind of mother entity of all these entities that like Bob, who go and essentially attach themselves to people to cause them to do horrible things, partly because it enjoy Bob's takes pleasure out of that and also takes pleasure in inhabiting the body and doing these things, but and takes pleasure in knowing that he's making somebody do these things. It's I find it, yeah, I find it very fascinating that David Lynch really believed these things as well. And of course, he was involved with his transcendental meditation and everything. He said that all the stuff that's in his movies, like he believes in. Somebody even asked him, "Do you believe in angels?" He's like, "Yeah, I do." And I think that it's interesting. Like I don't necessarily know if angels are what he. I don't think he believed in angels in a Judeo-Christian way, but angels in the
Yeah.
sense of entities of light or something. And I think both things exist, right? But and not everything in the dark is malevolent, but there are malevolent
Yes.
entities in the dark, and there are malevolent entities in the light. I don't think that has anything to do with dark or light in some cases. I do think, but there is aspects too of you know in the cliff off, for example, the tunnels immediately above the Malkuth, like leading to Gamaliel, are the tunnels of like these vampiric kind of entities. In Brazilian Kimbanda, they call them quiambas. They're like these kind of shells, ghostly shells that wander around and feed off of people and things like this. And so it's even in that the explanation for some of these type of parasitical entities that exist.
Yeah, I think this is very fascinating, and I think this is a good leeway to something we discussed like yesterday, I believe. Uh, it's this game called Bloodborne, and I believe it's based on the premise or like the how would you say the series of was it a Dark Soul, or what was the original Japanese game? You
Yeah,
know,
the original Japanese games was dark was Demon Souls, and then
yes,
Then you had Dark Souls 1, and then Miyazaki made Bloodborne while they were making other part of the team made Dark Souls 2.
Yeah.
Um, and then he came back and was the director for Dark Souls 3 and Elden Ring and Sekiro. But yeah, with Bloodborne, it's part of that series, and yeah, there's a whole aspect of these um the encounter of these old gods, and I just did I did an episode about the game with my friend Evan, which people can listen to as well if they want a kind of a crash course in it. But yeah, it's like these people in the past uncover these old ones who are these uh kind of entity, yeah, non-human entities that exist in this kind of other dimension. But some of them, one of them, Abritus, had become like trapped in our dimension essentially, or the dimension of the game, and they started using the blood to find essentially to heal. But then they started. There's this whole thing about there's the blood. They use the blood to heal and all these things, but it also starts causing transformations. Um, and then there's other parts of that where they do these like science, like there's like even like the altar of the surgical altar is one thing in it. Like there's also the whole thing of like them using like surgery and all these other techniques to transform people so that they can transform and gain eyes on the inside and all this stuff. Like it's very uh um and kind of you encounter these like beasts that kind of people transform these they beat werewolf stuff in the beginning, but then it gets more and more like uh insectile. There's one part in the DLC that is like watery, like there's this watery old one washed up in the sea, and they start it starts transforming the people in this village around it and stuff. Like there's this whole thing of like the mutation of human flesh and everything in the game. Yeah.
Yeah, it's I encountered this game like 5 years ago or whatever, like many years ago now, and um, I was struck that how like the world was extremely liminal, and it felt like the Silent Hill games, which I think that they are the hallmarks of the horror games in any medium. And of course these are both Japanese games, and it's like it feels like you know the Western studios can't tap into the liminal and the horror because apparently it's not marketable enough, and they don't really have a clue, but the Japanese somehow do, and they these both games like the Silent Hill and the Bloodborne, they feel like they are like worlds which are they exist without the player, and it's in normal Western games everything is catered to the player, and it's some kind of like a power fantasy or something. You are the destroyer, and you are the bad guy, and you are like a powerful. But in these games you are constantly getting like beaten up, and you could die at any minute, and you can, if you mess up, you can like lose everything. And it's like the challenge in the games by this From Software, the Bloodborne and Dark Souls. I have only played Bloodborne. It's like the difficulty level is so much more higher than any kind of other game. So it's definitely like an ordeal. It's punishing, and I believe that is the magic of these games, that they are like something else. And
They're definitely
yeah, I have.
they're
Yeah,
definitely very liminal. I mean, I just beat Dark Souls 1 yesterday, and even Dark Souls 1 even Dark Souls is very liminal. Dark Souls 2 gets even more like that, like where reality transforms. Like I think Dark Souls 3 in some ways is too. Like it's like you are in like this fantasy land, but you feel kind of unmoored from everything. And Bloodborne is very much like that. You feel like as soon as you step out into the city Yarnum, which is just like uh based, it's very much based off of Edinburgh. Um, so it's this kind of like gothic neo, it's like kind of Victorian neo gothic city essentially, you know. Um, and it just feels like, and it just looks like you look down and it just looks like the city just stretches down immeasurably, you know, like it's immeasurably like vertical for some, you know, like it doesn't feel, you feel unmoored, like you don't feel like you're part of any reality, like real true reality. And even like the way some of the shortcuts and things in the game work, like you go through like this forest and go down into like a dark you know, poison swamp shortly, and then go up this huge ladder where there's all these, it's like a corpse shoot of some sort. There's all these corpses all over the whole thing, and you go up this ladder and you get to the top, and then you open up a gate and you're at the beginning of where the beginning of the game was. You know, it's
Yeah.
very surreal in that way. I feel like where it all fits together, but on some level it doesn't quite make sense, you know, but it just feels like very dreamlike, and that's part of what made me fall in love with the games, you know.
Yeah, I understand. That is the same like Silent Hill games. I played the original Silent Hill game. That must have been like 25 years ago or something, or almost like 13 years ago.
It
I don't remember.
came out in
Yeah,
1999, so 26 years
yeah,
ago. Yeah.
yeah. So basically, um, of course, that was on PlayStation One, and the graphics were like to modern standards, they're absolutely crappy. But back in the day, it was completely different, and the soundtrack was something like it really felt like playing the game itself was like a ritual. And I have never had similar experience with any other games. Like after the first Silent Hill, and not to get too nerdy about games, I think the most interesting thing about this are, of course, the how they portray the liminal, and I believe we can move on to the
Yeah.
next thing, which is a movie from 2022. It's
Or
Skinamarink, and
yeah.
Canadian like experimental low budget horror movie, and it was
Be-
originally
before
recommended to me by the author Richard Gavin, who is a guest on yours and my show too. And he said that it really portrays this kind of very particular, peculiar style of the liminal. And I'd wanted to see it for many years now, uh, from since Richard recommended me the movie, and then I understood at some months ago at the cottage that it's finally available in Finland with during via some kind of you know streaming service. So I rented the movie digitally, and then I understood that I would have to make watching the movie screening a ritual in itself. And then I remembered that when I was very young, say around 10 or 12 years old, I had this habit of like bringing the travel TV to the sauna cabin at our cottage, which is a different building, and watch Omen and all other like horror movies in the sauna cabin at night by myself. It was completely it wasn't psychologically wise, it wasn't probably a good move, but I was really into that stuff even at so young. So I understood that I could kind of do a nostalgic, uh, you know, screening of the Skinamarink. So I brought my 14-inch TV to the sauna cabin, and then I prepared the whole evening to watch the movie and to get really into the mood. And I watched the movie in the dark of that sauna cabin, and I had the TV on a bench like in front of me in a way which kind of obstructed my path to the door. So I was basically imprisoned by the TV, and that was quite an experience. Before we get into the movie, I would like to hear your comments before I ramble on about my experience.
yeah, well, I actually wanted to say one more thing about
Yeah.
Silent Hill, we kind of tied it back to what we were talking about before. In Silent Hill 2, there's a scene. Silent Hill 2, I think, is one of the most amazing liminal games ever. There's a part where you go down this tunnel. So you go to the historical society and you open the door with this key that you got, and then you start going down, and you go down and you go down and you go down, and they have this like foghorn, this foghorn sound going as you
Yeah,
go down, and it gets louder and louder as you get down. And I think that it's actually like a minute or 2 minutes of video game playing time of going down these stairs, these endless stairs. I think it's like a minute, and it feels forever. And you go so far, and the whole part you get down to the uh this prison, and you're like, it's so bizarre. You definitely feel like you're outside of time, and at the end of in the prison, you keep going down and down and down, and then at the end of it, after you beat the final boss of the whole area, you open this door and you're on the side of like the side of the lake, like in Silent
yeah,
Hill. And it's such a fucking crazy moment, and definitely very much goes to something we mentioned earlier with time moving and everything, which I kind of I just wanted to bring that up. I thought
yeah,
what you because it connected so much with what we're talking about. But
yeah. It's kind of like a messes up your sense of space, the spatial horror. Still remember playing Silent Hill 2 myself, and I remember there also one scene where there is this some kind of apparent like hospital or mental asylum or something, and there was one creature or one like a character which was like kind of banging its head on a wall or something, and felt like it was like trapped in its own hell within the Silent Hill hell, so to speak, that didn't even understand or care that the protagonist was nearby, and only if you kind of harassed the character it would kind of attack you, but it was more so it was, it didn't even mind you at all. And I thought that this is like a genius level stuff, because it's like it really felt like this game was happening on like in itself, like even if you would shut down the game, stop playing, it would still play on, the game. And I believe that is something which is completely missing from the normal games, because you can always understand how the mechanics work in the games, that these are like a scripted events. But Silent Hill and Bloodborne seem really like you expect what is going to happen. It's like almost psychedelic.
yeah, definitely. And real quick before we get into Skinamarink, I'm just gonna pause for a
Yeah.
second.
Yes.
So yeah, now getting Skinamarink, what you described, I think is probably the most perfect way to watch Skinamarink, really. You know,
Yeah.
um, because the game, or not the game, the movie is very much like perfect for that kind of experience. I watched it like in the dark, actually with my headphones on. So I was watching my computer, it's quiet, so I had my headphones
Yeah.
plugged in, and that was like a perfect way to watch it as well, because it was like um uh how to describe, it was like you have to let it get into you, you know what I mean? It
Yeah.
has to kind
Immerse
of,
yourself.
yeah, it has to kind of immerse into you, to really um uh it is like a ritual in a way, the movie. You sit and you watch it, and I think for a lot of people it's could see it as kind of boring. That is what a lot of people think. It's like, oh, this is boring, whatever. But you have to kind of be in a receptive mindset to watch it, I think. You have to you have to kind of soak into what you're seeing and let the natural kind of um, flow of the movie kind of get into you. Um, is that, it is definitely very much an experimental film in that way. And so you do have to have patience, but as you get into it, it gets progressively more and more horrifying as the movie goes on, and by the end, anybody who has allowed the movie to get to them has always has the same type of experience where they feel like uneasy after watching the movie, you know.
Yeah. Yeah,
Like,
I actually had some um, memo. I did this kind of like a self interview after the movie in order to write like a proper. I think I can use this material with in this podcast. I have some notes written down, so I can read them directly from my computer. So basically, I first asked myself that when you first hit play, what was your mental and physical state? Did it shift during those initial 15 minutes? So I answered that I was curious, anticipatory, and touch anxious. The opening didn't hook me right away. It's a true slow burn, so my mindset stayed fairly steady. And I later said that. Yeah, basically, it just to continue on my own words. It went like this. I set up the premise and the sauna cottage, and I started watching that. And because I'm a quite a seasoned horror movie watcher, it really didn't kind of spook me at first or anything. So basically, and I know about a bit about the premise, and I took this as a challenge. So basically, it didn't uh, give me this like a strong impression in the beginning, but later when I watched it, and I had my dog with me because I was going to I'm trying to um, kind of accustom my dog to spend time at the sauna cottage because it's a new place to her, and she had already been. I mean, she had been kind of accustomed to the place before, so I knew that I could watch the movie without any hindrance. So basically, at one point, because the movie is about two little kids who wake up in the house without their parents, and they are obviously dumbfounded what is happening. So basically, in one instance of the movie, the children are pointing something like off screen, something like disturbing and something creepy. And at that point, my dog, which was sleeping like during the almost whole of the movie, woke up and started to watch like intently, like beyond the TV. So it basically looked like the characters in the movie and my dog were seeing something like off screen, and it was like even comically, hilariously creepy. That I was like, what the hell is happening? This is like too much, because it was almost like a scripted thing, even though it wasn't. So that was like probably the high point of the movie, along with some other scenes that it started to kind of apparently affect the reality of the sauna cabin and
yeah.
my dog.
Yeah, I mean, I think the movie has that potential. It does, like you said, it starts off slow. Um, it doesn't, it's not creepy at first, really. You're kind of like just kind of trying to like process what you're watching. It's very repetitive. It feels very much like they're trapped in some type of cycle. So as the movie progresses, they're
Yeah,
trying different things. Like, it starts off with them. I think that's the point though, because it starts off with them kind of waking up and their parents aren't home, and at first they're kind of like, okay, this is weird. Like, mom's not opening the door. It seems like maybe the mother's home, right? Like, yeah, there's that
yeah,
weird moment where, uh, um, at one point, like right where they go into the room that she's supposed to be in, right? And
yeah,
that's when they encounter the entity, uh, I think the first time, right? And that's where the movie starts getting really creepy to me.
yeah.
That section, like
That was
when
a nasty scene. Yeah,
yeah, when that scene occurs, you're like, oh, okay. It because it goes from kind of being okay, what's going on? Is very like, to oh fuck. And it as the movie progresses, it starts to really feel like my perception of the movie was almost like these kids were trapped. Um, they woke up and they're in trapped by some type of entity and like
Yeah,
some type of weird like cyclical hell. You know what I mean? Like
yeah,
that's what it felt like. And as it goes on, they start doing crazier things, you know. They
yeah,
start getting manipulated by the entity to do bad things, and it by the ending, I think really left me feeling very uneasy, like when you get to that ending. I know my friend
yeah,
Mike Hill, he when he saw it in the theater, he was like one of the few people in the theater. Like, there was like he said there was like a couple, and then this one guy, and the couple left about halfway through, and
yeah,
the other guy was asleep by the end, which
yeah,
Mike said he left and it was like midnight because it was when the movie was showing in the theater was like 10 o'clock or something, and
yeah,
he's walking to his car through this like abandoned, this empty like garage, you know, and feeling very uncanny, uneasy feeling for after watching the movie. Like it kind of creeps up on you. You end the movie and you kind of go okay, you start having this weird
yeah.
dread feeling,
The
that kind of
the
settles in.
afterburn.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it actually happened to me. I'm glad that you reminded me about this because I went back to the yeah. I think this is a good point. After watching the movie and at the end where there is this like this electric fuzz, this kind of like buzzing like static, and you can almost kind of see some kind of face in the like some kind of malignant face in the static, and then the movie just ends. And I remember actually after that final scene when I just had to kind of like a close up shop because I had the setup in the all the electronics in the sauna cabin, so I had to kind of wrap things up and go to the cottage, and it was completely dark outside and my wife was already sleeping, and of course there was this mess of just packing up the stuff, and it was just I believe I was in a hurry when I left the cabin because I had this sense of uneasiness like your friend, and then I went to the cabin, and I think I got to the most of the movie when I sat down in the sauna. It's not the sauna, sorry, the cottage proper at the big table, and I had my tablet and I had my like a wireless keyboard, and I was writing in complete darkness, listening to some kind of fan-made Skinamarink soundtrack with noise cancelling headphones. Then I really got into this very, very creepy, like a surreal state, and I really felt like I was surrounded, or I was like, something was behind me or something. Where in logically, I knew that my wife was, sleeping quite near me, and my dog was also at cottage. But I really felt like very uneasy and very surreal, like that this is some kind of, like hardcore liminal space right now. And I was writing my, the self interview, the review, you know.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's the power of the movie to me. Like if you allow it to, really, I think it comes down to if you make it about halfway through the movie when it starts really like um things start happening. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
when once you get to that point, if you cross that point, you're probably already in a kind of a weird meditative state of mind, just from,
Yes.
and I think that's the whole purpose of the first half being this kind of weird, repetitive, uncanny, but not necessarily too scary. I think it's mostly to create a rhythm that puts you into a kind of liminal state in a way. You know what I mean? That's what
Yeah.
I like I said, this is it's a very experimental film, and I think part of it being an experimental film is that the director was trying to edit together the first section to put you into a almost like a trance state, so that when things really turned and became more and more malevolent and eerie, or not just eerie, but like more scary as the movie progresses. That would then you would probably fall into it more, and then it would leave you with this feeling. I think that was kind of purposeful from the director's point, you know.
I also think so. That and I find it interesting that the director, whose name is Kyle Edward Ball, I think he shot the movie in his childhood home, which was then uh, occupied by some other people as well. But he got a permit for that, so I think that's even even more intriguing that it was the director's like a childhood home. So he really kind of managed to tap into his childhood liminal through the lens of the characters in the movie, which were the little children.
Yeah, definitely. Because and in a lot of ways, I think that he is maybe a little younger than me, but he's definitely a kid. You know, he grew up in the '90s, I think. You know, and
Yeah,
I think the movie captures also an element of like '90s, the way '90s houses felt. You know, uh, the way TVs were back then. You know, the just the general feeling. And but I also think it taps into just being a child as a whole. I remember definitely a few times as a kid waking up in the middle of the night near for whatever, you know, like I remember my dad one time like went out to go down to like the convenience store, you know, at like 12 o'clock or something. You know what I mean?
yeah,
But I was asleep and I didn't know. And
yeah.
he thought, oh, it'll be fine, whatever. You know, he'll be okay. He's asleep if I go out for a minute. And I like fucking I remember waking up and he wasn't there and I was like freaking out, you know. Like
Yeah.
where it happened, like, you know, you feel like this sense of uh things like uh being disanchored or something, you know what I mean?
Yeah, reality is somehow broken, and I remember something similar myself. That when going to the bathroom, it felt like creepy, of course, and I believe this is like a generational experience of many people. I know a person whose parents went to the bar, and they stayed for many hours at the bar, and this person was around, I believe she was 8 to 10 years old, also quite young, and she had to spend the whole evening and maybe the night alone, only with the company of the TV. And she said that it was very creepy, of course. And then there was this added threat of like missing her parents, and of course they were in the at the bar getting drunk, and that was kind of a nasty thing to do for a little their own daughter, and at, I believe she said that even as an adult it left such a like a liminal trauma that she constantly kind of needs to have some kind of like a audio distraction if she's alone somewhere like TV or podcast or something, because it really brings up the childhood, the uh, years probably of this kind of thing happening, that you are alone at the liminal space, and you don't know if your parents are going back home at night. So it's basically like a like a manifold trauma, and it brings to my mind the Finnish horror author Marko Hautala. He has this collections of short stories, and one story is called Saurin Hiljaisuus, the silence of Sori. Pekka Sori was a Finnish late night radio host, and he had this call-in show where like very strange people called at the middle of night, and he was a psychologist, and he discussed things about this discussed with these people. And in the novel, this is a spoiler, but not many listeners abroad can obviously read the short story because it's in Finnish. The story goes like this: that there is this young guy, and his experience is creepily like similar to my friend's. tale. So basically, in the story, the young kid, the young guy, is alone in his apartment, and he watches his parents like evacuate the house in the parking lot, mumbling something that their son is some kind of monster or crazy or something. So they're like a kind of evading their own son, which is of traumatic to the child, of course. And then he later understood that everything is best in this kind of like a gray, liminal, static or haze. And he understood that he is not alone in the apartment, that something from an abandoned house has followed him there. And he can feel the entity kind of like, you know, um, how would you say, like putting its hand on his shoulder, and the entity at the end of the story asks that, "Are we friends? Are you my friend?" And the little boy understands that he has no other option, that the entity is only friends, but he is terrified to death about the entity which is kind of hovering behind him. And the fucking novel, sorry, the horror story is absolutely creepy and eerie. I remember when I first read it at the cottage, I was like, I had this absolute cold shivers like running down my spine, and I believe this really captures the childhood liminal, don't you think?
Definitely, yeah. The world is much more frightening as a kid. You're a little, you're smaller than everything around you.
Yeah,
You don't really understand things, and I think kids also. I do think that kids are tapped into stuff in a way that
yeah,
it starts to get beaten out of you as you get older. You know what I mean? Yeah,
yeah,
for a lot of people, by just life and uh the darkness can be much more scary. You uh like my best friend growing up, the house his parents lived in, that he grew up in, uh the whole basement, that it was like a two-story house, but it was like um on the side of a mountain, kind of, you know what I mean? So essentially the bottom floor on one side was on the street, but the other side was like in the mountain. So the second floor was like where the back door was, if you know what I mean.
yeah,
Um, so that bottom floor, there was almost no windows. So there was like some windows in the front room, but then you'd go back under the stairs and there was this big room with like one little like window on one side, and that was it. And then a dark hallway down to his parents' room, which also had like maybe one window on one, two windows or something. And uh and even the upstairs was like very dark. But I remember us being like so like scared of the basement area at night.
yeah,
Like not the basement but like the downstairs, because it was just so dark, you know, like all at all times, like even in the daytime it was dark. And the light seemed to always never really illuminate too well, much like what your wife was saying about your
yeah,
like that was what that basement was. But that whole house had this kind of creepy feeling, like which we all felt, like him and his brother and I. um but that basement really felt it. And so as kids, we were like very afraid to go down there at night, like we didn't like to go downstairs at night. I mean, once we got older, teenagers is different, but like particularly as kids, yeah, at night when it was nighttime, we would just say we would be upstairs.
yeah. It's an interesting thing that some people are more like you know attuned, or somehow kind of they experience this liminal much more like how would you say, like they are susceptible to it, for some reason. And I believe that the liminal is kind of like a dimension or some kind of, how would you say, this kind of like a frequency or something. And you just somehow tap into it. And then other times you are like jaded or shielded from it. And but I believe this kind of extreme liminal uh, experience could be induced to almost anybody. I'm quite sure of it with the right tools and the right, right environment. It would be kind of brought upon even to the most like a jaded or most like a hard-headed individuals. Don't you think?
Definitely. I think that almost every human being has had some experience with something that we would call liminal, you know.
Yeah.
Some people might just kind of, you know, shrug it off and go, "Oh, that was weird," and just kind of pretend like it didn't happen because, you know, they don't want to shake their worldview. But I do think that almost everybody has had
Yeah.
some type of experience like that, and I think that every child has. You know, I don't think there's a single kid who doesn't have those experiences. So we've all had them as children. I think the liminal gets more hardened out of people as they get older. But even then, all it takes is something to happen to break down the uh, normal perception of reality, or for somebody to get into some type of trance state or something. Even without meaning to, and that's why people have these experiences. And normal people, like, you know, what we would call normal people, call into shows like the Monsters Among Us podcast and stuff and talk about how, you know, I was driving down the road and I had this crazy experience, you know, like, or whatever. Like, it's something that's much more widespread, I think, than people think, give credit to. That people have these types of eerie experiences, and all kinds of people, you know.
I believe so. I believe there have been some kind of, studies that even in Finland, that it's like every other people at least seem to have had some kind of mystical or like a weird experience. Not that they like to talk about that, but it has been proved in these studies. And it brings to my mind a topic we might have discussed before, but if we haven't, this is like a great leeway into this concept of daimonic reality. It is coined by, I believe he's a British author, Patrick Harpur, and he has this book, Daimonic Reality, A Field Guide to the Otherworld. I have this book and I'm reading it. And Harpur posits that daimonic reality is neither wholly external nor internal, but operates within the imaginal realm, a term drawn from Islamic mystic Henry Corbin's interpretation of mundus imaginalis, the intermediary world, distinct from both the empirical and the purely imaginary. This realm is inhabited by daimons, from Greek daimon, meaning a guiding spirit or intermediary being, which acts as agents of the unconscious and manifests symbolically in culture, dreams, myth, and paranormal experience. Do you know this term?
Well, I haven't read that book, but I do know. I mean, I under daimonic reality. Yeah, I know
Yeah.
that term. Yeah, and obviously, like what it represents, and I definitely agree with that. That it exists on both internal and outer, like, because it's not just an internal process, or say, you know, the daimonic is not just like psychology. It's actually something that exists external to us, but our experience of it occurs on the
Yeah.
internal as well. So it's like interface between this kind of external daimonic reality and the internal perception of our human bodies, if you know what I mean.
Yes, and I may continue here that within Harpur's framework, I'm reading from notes, the daimonic serves as a necessary counterpart to rational consciousness, expressing truths that cannot be fully apprehended by empirical or scientific methods. The concept resonates with Jungian psychology, particularly the archetype of the shadow and the anima slash animus, and draws upon traditions of Neoplatonism, Hermeticism, and Romanticism. And I believe that this is a very good term and quite a paradox in the sense that, as Harper posits, that it's both like an internal and external thing, and it's both like almost parapsychological, and then again it's highly subjective experience. And when it comes to the my favorite thing, the extreme liminal experience, I believe if somebody would have some kind of, like an ontological shock, like a very drastic reality break, one would be very susceptible to this kind of, things, these kind of frequencies. And I have been thinking that this is again very hard to explain, but this is something I have tried time and time again to kind of elaborate. But I'm thinking that this is a good contrast. Think about somebody who is like a average Joe, so to speak. He goes to the work and watches TV and some he doesn't have too much of like an inner life, and he's definitely not interested in Jungian themes and whatnot, And this kind of person is completely, how would you say, he is completely content with this kind of living. And of course, he would probably have some kind of scientific type of like a materialistic viewpoint at life, that everything is explained. There's nothing to see, move along, so to speak. And then this kind of person would probably have the ontological shock, and imagine the horror and the terror of kind of entering the what in the Silent Hill games happens after there's this foghorn sound. It kind of like you enter this katabatic world where everything is somehow completely broken, and it doesn't like adhere by any like rationalistic logic. And I'm somehow very assured that this kind of world is real. It's out there, but you're most often luckily in it. But it's there. But I'm not referring into some kind of, even in some kind of hell, but something if it is completely surreal. It's very hard to explain, but maybe you can kind of continue from here.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to say.
Well, I think the demonic reality is occurring all around us at all times. It's just another
Yes.
part of reality. It's ourselves that create like doorways to it in some ways. You know what I mean? We put up like big big iron cages around us that keep us from connecting to it, right? And
Yeah.
psychologically speaking. And I think that that is definitely more of a byproduct of modern mechanistic materialistic society. We've talked about this kind of stuff before, and it's
Yes.
like uh so because I think that the scientific viewpoint, which is very much common today, is very much restrictive and really kind of keeps people trapped in kind of a mental cage. I do think that when they have an unloosening of the prison doors, right, and the thing that's from outside, which is really around us at all times, the demonic reality intrudes into them. That could cause a psychic break. It could cause all kinds of things. I mean, it kind of gets into the idea of intrusion of the real, an apprehension of the real, as people like Lacan say, or Some people can perceive it as the absurd, like
Yeah.
Camus. But there is this um, breaking down, and requires some type of integration or transformation of the worldview um, to take it in. Obviously, some people might try to put the prison door back up, and like by duct tape or something, and try to pretend like they didn't see what they saw. They open it, the door open, and they look into the demonic reality, and they go, "Oh fuck," and they try to close it up. I think once the door opens, it's never can be fully closed. And I think for people like ourselves, like for me, I feel most alive and most inspired and most like um invested in life when I can really connect with that demonic reality. When I could feel myself really being connected to it, and I could, apprehend it around me. And for me, that's what makes me feel most alive. But I think for some people, it's more of a horrifying experience, that like a Lovecraftian experience for them.
I believe it's kind of like an uncharted territory. For example, the contrast of spending time and the city and my, for example, this city apartment as contrasted to the cottage. Uh, I have been at the city apartment for some couple of weeks, and I have been very busy with work. So I have been kind of immersed with consensus reality without my own regard, so to speak. But I'm going to visit the cottage like next weekend with friends, and I can only believe the contrast when I'm going to the pit and I'm going to have some atavistic ritual there to kind of up, wind out from the strains of consensus reality. It will be like an atavistic and cathartic experience. But it's quite interesting that um, people like us kind of are stimulated within the demonic reality. It's weird thing because I understood that I have this kind of neurology, always have, because it's of course I'm bored with it, so to speak. That I always crave for some kind of stronger intellectual or otherwise stimulation because I cannot be content with the the straight jacket of consensus reality. And it has, of course, led me to some very strange paths. And here we are talking about this thing. But I really think that this my thesis for this extreme liminal is somehow, it's distilling as we speak, and it's getting the map is getting like charted, and when I mapped the level one, then I understand that there's this level two and the level three, and it never fucking ends. It's completely insane in the sense that I have been studying this phenomenon for as long as I can remember. I'm now 47 years old, and I'm 8, nearing 50, and I feel like I have just scratched the surface of the liminal. And it's exhilarating to understand that whereas like 10 years ago I thought that my work here is done, that I'm completely run into the wall and I just cannot break through. But here we are, like 10 years later, I understand that I absolutely know nothing about this. This is like the chasm is endless.
Yeah, it is an endless process, and it is a lifetime's worth. And I think there's an aspect to it that no matter what, we never really know fully you can never know fully everything. And it is uh and that's even like the thing with true scientific viewpoint, is that it's a process of discovery always. And as at one point in time, the occult and the esoteric process, alchemy, all these things was right hand in hand with science. You know what I mean? Like, and I
Yes.
think that is more of an unnatural state the way it is now, where it's become separated since probably like the Enlightenment, the Victorian era, like it's become so separated in the modern era that I think is part of why our culture is so unstabilized,
Yeah,
because
it's unraveling.
because true scientific mindset, true skepticism, for example, requires actually being open to reality in a deeper sense of it, not holding on to dogmas, right? And
Yeah.
the esoteric science, as many uh, people had used to say, particularly back in the 1900s, like is a science in its own way because it's an exploration of reality in the depths of of demonic reality and say like nowadays it's really fallen out of favor in academia, like maybe it's coming back again, but for a long time there was a period of time where in academia there was paranormal research, right, where people were
Yeah.
where schools were willing to have guys who were doing paranormal experiments to try to see uh to explore those things, right? I mean, you think about Ghostbusters, right? Like they that starts off with them, at a university and getting kicked out, but like there was a time, and then for many years it became very like um looked down upon by academic
Yeah.
world. And I don't know if that's changed too much, but maybe it has. But I think I think that all those kind of paranormal investigators were uh a lot of those guys were some of the people who started exploring the ideas of like the liminal. They started delving in, like people like John Keel and all these and other like actual like paranormal investigators who did these kind of experiments with ESP and all this kind of stuff. I mean, there was a willingness to explore all those things that I think was very common at one point in time, and I think that's true uh exploration, and I think that's part of the and it is endless. We don't no matter how much you go, you're always going to learn new things, and have new experiences, um and you start to formulate somewhat. I think that you can formulate a worldview for yourself based off of what you have experienced and the evidence that you have encountered, but you should never make it into a dogma, in my opinion.
Yeah.
You should always be open to changing it, like if with different data or different experiences. You know what I mean?
Definitely, and I think the straitjacket of consensus reality is like a kind of like a idiotic. It's like a self-imprisonment in the sense that if somebody is completely immersed in this kind of prison, he or she doesn't understand that it's quite easy to break from the concentrate. It's absolutely fearsome to even try that. It's like it's disturbing, and that is the reason there exists the safe space of consensuality. And I just think it's such a waste in the sense that for even without any kind of understanding of magic or the occult or the esoteric, if you would just even scientifically think that you are a person, I'm not speaking of you, I'm speaking rhetorically of some imaginary person here, is like living in the 2020s, and we have all this kind of technological advancement. There are psychedelics, for example, and there are, you know, like like a wealth of information in the internet, so you can do like unimaginable stuff nowadays. You have such a potential for that kind of information and knowledge. But videos like reels in Instagram and TikTok and whatever the crap, and they think the reality is boring and everything is shit. Of course it's shit. It's consensus fucking reality. It's like a dumbed down, uh, you know uh, it's like an imbecile version of reality, whereas the extreme reality is full of the extreme liminal, of course. But it's like a too much of a task for so-called normal people to even try this thing, because there exists an industry of distractions, Hollywood and the games and series and whatnot, music, to kind of keep people in the consensus reality matrix, so to speak. They're like basically, like in the movie, they're like human batteries which are kind of operated by some kind of parasitical, nasty entities. And people don't even understand that they are like basically wage slaves, and they are just, their whole existence, psychologically wise, is managed through this kind of distraction. And I have fantasized sarcastically that if there would be some kind of like a virus which would completely wipe out any kind of mindless entertainment, the social media or whatever, and people would have to bear the burden of consensus reality without any kind of lubrication, so to speak, it would be just completely horrendous, and there would be absolutely crazy revolutions, and people would just go absolutely fucking insane, because nobody, I mean, nobody could, bear this kind of consensus reality without any. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. You cut
Yeah,
out for a
yeah,
little bit.
yeah.
The last thing you said was nobody could bear consensus reality
The,
without something.
yeah, yeah. I said nobody could bear the burden of the raw consensus reality without any kind of like painkillers or like spiritual drugs, like I mean, entertainment and this kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think that's
and
actually
and, and
when,
this is the reason for this kind of thing.
yeah, yeah. Well, I think that's one interesting that I think is interesting is that I had this realization earlier this year that the kind of idea of like Albert Camus of like the absurdity, it, while being somewhat true, also is a byproduct of a confrontation with the mechanistic consensus reality that does have this kind of absurdity to it, this kind of endless cogs and machines and this kind of like dehumanizing quality, and I think when we apprehend that, then when the kind of the kind of shielding we have to make ourselves exist within that kind of break down, and suddenly you're seeing it for what it is. I do think that can cause despair and all kinds of feelings. But I actually think that that's not even seeing full reality, because full reality is when you see the demonic reality. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And when you see the demonic reality, some people might be horrified by it, but I think a lot of people might be more like excited by it, because there is something living about the demonic level. And I think our older humans were more connected to the demonic level, and that's why they seem to live with more life force than we do now. You know what I mean? Like I
yeah,
don't think that people live with as much vitality, even though they live longer and everything. Their lives are more gray. They're um, where yeah, some people might have horrible lives that were squalid and stuff, but they still lived with a kind of weird fire that you just don't like. If you read anything, like you read like old book, if you anybody who reads books from before the 1900, from 1900s and earlier, even the first half of the 20th century, uh people's experience of reality was so much deeper, you know
yeah,
than a lot of what you see nowadays. People were like had these intense emotions, and were like really like alive in a way that you just I think has that kind of gray consensus reality of the absurd has kind of like slowly broken them down, ever since probably like which I think probably started during the Industrial Revolution. It was like a transformation, a mind virus, as Burroughs says, and that's kind of created this kind of prison, this kind of iron prison for people.
Definitely, I think this is the problem of I mean, it's called the meaning crisis. The Canadian scientist, I believe, John Verveek had this great series on YouTube called "Awakening from the Meaning Crisis," and he actually discusses numinos in some episode, I believe, some lecture, and I think this all happened like. Maybe as Nietzsche had this phrase, the God is dead and we have killed him. And what he apparently meant that there was this unifying story, this the great story of the Christianity. Whereas, of course, I have my criticism for Christianity, but after the Age of Enlightenment and the French Revolution and whatnot, uh, I believe the meaning has slowly eroded, and now we are living in some kind of like a post-meaning era, which is quite nihilistic. And I believe people are like sick from the inherent lack of meaning, and there's
Yeah.
just this, the distractions. And I believe Jung himself said something like, if the people are wounded in their psyche or the soul is like there is this hole in the soul, people tend to be interested and attracted by the most trivial things, materialistic things in the world, because it kind of acts as some kind of uh, like a fill to the emptiness of the soul. And it's completely horrendous to see how people are practically like distracted to the level of some kind of zombies in
Yeah.
nowadays
Yeah.
world.
And what would be best for them would be to a I think some type of experience to reawaken to the liminal and apprehend the true reality, which lies behind the mechanistic one
Yeah,
that, and see the demonic. And I think even though it might cause horror in some people, in a lot of people at first, it also will have fascination because it'll infuse their life with some type of excitement. And that's why people, you do see like the rise in people believing in ghosts and trying to go out and have like ghost hunting and whatever we might think a ghost actually is. That they're, I think maybe some ghosts, some are just entities, whatever. The fact that people are doing that more and more, particularly ever since the early 2000s, I think is an encouraging sign in a weird way, because I think it's like people are really, what they're really doing is they're wanting to have experiences to apprehend something beyond something else. They're trying to have these liminal experiences. And I think that's something that our uh, culture has kind of taken away from people, where, at one point in time, not only were people always living in I think when we the electrical era, um, and particularly before the era of radio and TV and everything, um, humans lived in constant apprehension of darkness, if that makes sense. Of night was very
definitely.
dark.
And I
Um,
believe the darkness was real. Oh,
yeah,
yeah,
and they lived much less distractions. If you think about at one point in time, uh, really the only thing they had to occupy them was reading and maybe like taking up some type of hobby. And um, I think this is part of why. I do think that a lot of people in the past were somewhat more intelligent than most people today, yeah, in some way. But it's like, but they're also just more close to the liminal states of reality, and people believed in spiritual things, and um, I don't know. I just think that it's time for people to quest after that, and give themselves those experiences. Go and have a experience of um, even if it is like going on a ghost hunt, like go to
Yeah,
like the you know here there's a few of those like creepy old asylums that offer ghost hunts that people can go on. Go do that and go
yeah,
go to like some abandoned wood somewhere and or creepy wood in the middle of the night and have these experiences, because I think that it's like it opens the doorway to the actual demonic reality that I think really needs to manifest. And one thing that's got to be pointed out though is that because that demonic reality has been suppressed so much by modern by you know the tyranny of modern culture, I do think that it is that shadow element where it has become a bit more terrifying.
yeah.
But it was always somewhat terrifying, but in a good way though. Go and embrace it and have these experiences. And movies like Skinamarink and even like video games like Silent Hill, I think help people access that as well. Horror, really good horror movies and horror stories and even some fantasy stories and things like this. Those are things that are tools for us to really connect with those elements. You know what I mean?
Yes, I think that is the reason because horror movies are still a thing, and there's of course the plethora of true crime, fiction and is it fiction or not? But I mean, I like a true crime stuff, and it's. I think people yearn for something else than this safe space of conscious reality, and yeah, I'm of the same mind that. Whatever it is, do something, go somewhere, and you like get into the ecstatic state. I mean, like if the ecstasis means like like outside and stasis being in a locked in place. So basically, ecstatic would mean that somebody or something would kind of throw you out of yourself. And I believe for the Western modern person, it would be a good idea to have some kind of, ecstatic experience via whatever means, because it would kind of be the shock to the system. And yeah,
Well, I think
I believe that's the thing.
y-
That's the trick.
yeah. Well, you think in the past, particularly pre-Christian times, but even into Christianity, but particularly pre-Christian, people had I guess liminal rights. You had a right, like as you go from boyhood to manhood, you might go to do like a vision quest, or you might go sit out on the burial mound. That was something Scandinavians did.
Yeah,
Um, and it was a rite of passage from one state into the other, and a rite of connecting to the ancestors and connecting to the demonic reality, right?
yeah,
And those are things that I think humans need. Humans need those experiences. I'm a big fan of the Newkirks, did the show Hellier, and they have their podcast, Haunted Objects podcast, and they're really awesome, kind of paranormal investigator type people who also are involved with like witchcraft and the esoteric and occult and stuff. And uh, Greg Newkirk, both of them were saying in their episode about what are those fucks called? The people that the Conjuring is based off of. This fucking idiot. I can't think of their names. The kind of
yeah. I know the
yeah,
couple. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Was talking about how they thought that people were having these experiences, like a lot of these haunting experiences, or even like what people would see as possession. They were actually like rites of, I guess, initiation of passage in some way. They needed to kind of have this experience, to progress. And
yeah,
then you have these people coming in with these hardcore Christian ideas and totally destroying that, totally like um kind of halting the process of you know of transformation that somebody was going through, because they, in their mindset, it was just evil or something. And I think that is common very common in Christian side. When you put it in a mechanistic, somebody might be going through these types of experiences, and um, a psychologist might go, well, you're crazy, or take some medicine, take some medication,
Yeah,
yeah, like, uh, when somebody just needed somebody to guide them through the experience. That was what was genius about Jung. He would have
yeah.
somebody come to him with like maybe frozen in like mid initiatory process, and just be stuck in a static state of horror, and he'd guide them through that process for themselves of individuation and initiation, and I do think that that's necessary, and that's why I think that people should go out and have these experiences.
Definitely. Hey, Carl, I need to tune out soon because I have a long workday ahead tomorrow. But
Yeah.
maybe we could close this discussion with the lexicon entry of the liminal
Yeah. I was gonna say I need to close out here in a minute too.
term
So,
because all of this probably, yeah, yeah.
oh yeah, we could.
But I
Yeah.
think this would be a good information for the listeners. So basically, liminal is an adjective. It's from Latin limen, meaning threshold. In anthropology, introduced by Arnold von Gennep in Les Rites de Passage. It was 1909. And elaborated by Victor Turner in The Ritual Process, 1969, denotes transitional betwixt and between phase of rite of passage, which are suspended, ambiguity prevails, and participants may experience communitas before reintegration. In esoteric and occult discourse, liminal marks the boundary conditions, times, states, and sites. In example, dawn, dusk, doorways, thresholds, crossroads, gravesites, held to be especially conducive to divination, necromancy, trance, and spirit contact. The term also encompasses altered states as hypnagogia and vigil keeping, where perception is thought to be most permissible. Related forms, liminality, liminoid, Turner's term for analogous, often voluntary phenomena in complex societies. See also threshold, crossroads, rites of passage, twilight.
Yeah. I think it's perfect. It's everything we are talking about just now. The whole concept of the liminal.
Yes,
So we've discussed the liminal in the past, but I do think this is probably one of the best episodes we've done about the whole topic. So we'll delve into stuff we hadn't even talked about before. So I hope people enjoy this episode. As always, it's been a pleasure, Constantine, and of course we'll be doing more of these as the time, So I hope that people get something out of this.
definitely. Thank you for this discussion and have a good night.
You too, Constantine.